When did you discover someone close was stealing from you? I never thought betrayal would come from inside my own home. But the night I discovered the truth, it felt like the air itself turned poisonous, heavy with a secret that had been crawling beneath my skin for months without me noticing. It started small, loose change missing from the jar I kept by the coffee machine, a 20 disappearing from my wallet. At first, I blamed myself. I told myself I must have forgotten I spent it, that maybe I was too distracted, too tired from work. But then bills I swore I'd paid started showing up with red notices. Late fees stacked on top of numbers that didn't make sense. Are you sure you didn't misplace it? My sister Emma asked one evening, her tone carefully neutral. I wanted to believe she was right, that I'd just been careless. That stress had me scattered, that deep down, something itched, something sharp. I began watching more closely, counting the bills in my wallet every morning, checking the bank app before bed, and still numbers shifted like shadows. Withdrawals I didn't remember making, gas stations in towns I hadn't driven to, online orders from stores I never visited. At first, I thought maybe my account had been hacked. So I changed my passwords, cancelled my cards, issued new ones. The next week, the same thing happened. That's when the pit in my stomach began to grow teeth. One night, I stayed awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening to the creaks of the old house. I thought about my roommate, my cousin, Daniel, snoring just down the hall. He'd moved in with me after his divorce, said he needed a fresh start, someone to lean on, and I gave him that, because he was blood, because that's what family does. But then I remembered the times he'd been oddly generous. How he bought takeout for us after I complained about missing cash. How he always seemed to have enough for cigarettes, for beer, even though he was supposedly broke. The next morning, I checked the trash. Buried under beer cans was a crumpled receipt, my credit card number, his signature scrawled at the bottom. I stared at it until the ink blurred from the sweat in my hands. When I confronted him that evening, he didn't even flinch. "What's a couple bucks between family?" he said, shrugging, like he was doing me a favor by stealing from me. "Daniel, it's not a couple bucks. It's hundreds. My bills are piling up." His face hardened. "Maybe you should budget better." That was the moment something inside me cracked. I wanted to throw him out right then, to scream, to demand every cent back. But I didn't, because I was raised to believe family comes first, because I thought maybe he'd stop if he saw how much it hurt me. But he didn't stop. A week later, I came home early from work and found him in my room, my dresser drawers open, my socks and shirts tossed aside, and in his hands, my mother's locket, the one thing she left me before she died. "Put it down," I said. My voice came out low, shaking. He turned slowly, the locket dangling from his fingers. "You don't even wear it," he said flatly. "It's not yours." His jaw flexed. For a moment, I thought he might pocket it anyway, but then he tossed it back into the drawer and brushed past me. I stood there, trembling, listening to his footsteps fade. And in that silence, I realized something that chilled me more than the theft itself. He wasn't just stealing money, he was stealing pieces of my life. And if I didn't stop him, he'd take everything. That night, I installed cameras, tiny ones, hidden in corners. I told myself it was just to prove I wasn't losing my mind, that I wasn't paranoid. But when I checked the footage the next morning, I saw him, sneaking into my room, rifling through my desk, taking cash from the envelope I kept for rent. Watching it made me sick, like I'd swallowed glass. I knew then I couldn't pretend anymore. I couldn't excuse it as stress, or carelessness, or family loyalty, because betrayal has a face, and that face was Daniel's. But the hardest part wasn't catching him. It was deciding what to do next. Because calling the police on a stranger is easy, but calling the police on blood, on the cousin who used to share comic books with me as a kid, that's the kind of choice that rips you apart. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with the footage on my laptop, waiting for him to come home. My hands shook as I pressed pause on the frame where he pocketed the rent money. The front door opened. His footsteps echoed down the hall. I looked up, heart pounding. "Daniel," I called, my voice trembling. He froze in the doorway, sensing something in the air. And that's where everything truly began to unravel. He saw the laptop before he saw my face, the frozen frame of him digging through my desk drawer, his hand clutching the envelope. His eyes widened, then narrowed, calculating in a split second. "What the hell is this?" he muttered, his voice rough. "You tell me," I said, forcing my tone to stay steady, though my heart was trying to escape my chest. He walked closer, slow, cautious, like a wolf sizing up prey. He leaned over the table, his smell beer and cigarettes wrapping around me. He stared at the screen, then back at me. "You've been spying on me?" I swallowed. "I've been protecting myself." For a moment he said nothing. His jaw worked, his eyes flicking between my face and the laptop. Then he gave a short, humorless laugh. "You think this proves anything? You're gonna ruin your own family over a couple bucks?" I pushed the spacebar, letting the video play. His movements filled the screen. Every drawer, every envelope, every bill. His hand slipping the cash into his pocket. The color drained from his face. But instead of shame, I saw something else rage. "You had no right," he snapped, slamming the laptop shut so hard I thought the screen would crack. "No right to invade my privacy." "Your privacy?" I said, my voice breaking. "That's my room, Daniel. My money, my life." He leaned closer, his breath hot. "And what are you gonna do about it? Call the cops? Turn me in? Go ahead. See what happens when the family hears you sold me out." The word family hit me like a blow. Because he knew. He knew how much that word chained me. How every holiday, every funeral, every wedding came with the unspoken rule. Loyalty above all else. I don't want to ruin you, I whispered. I just want you to stop. He smirked. You think I'm the only one? You think you're the only one holding this family together? He shook his head slowly. We all take what we need to survive. You're just too blind to see it. The kitchen light flickered above us, humming like some cruel witness. My chest felt heavy, my hands trembling under the table. Give it back, I said finally. My voice so soft I barely recognized it. Every dollar, every cent, or you're out of here. He stared at me for a long moment, then leaned back, crossing his arms. His smirk faded into something colder. You're making a mistake, he said. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing his voice echo in my head. You're making a mistake. In the morning, I checked my wallet. Another 50 was gone. That was when I realized I wasn't just dealing with a thief. I was dealing with someone who thought he owned me. I started noticing things I'd missed before. My credit card statement showed late-night online orders for electronics. Headphones, speakers, a gaming console, all shipped to the house. He'd hidden the boxes in the garage, buried under old tools. When I confronted him again, he shrugged. I'll pay you back. With what? I demanded. You don't have a job. He looked at me then with something I'd never seen before. A sharpness. A cruelty. Maybe you should worry less about what I'm doing, and more about what people might think if they find out about you. What's that supposed to mean? I asked, my stomach turning. He smiled thinly. Everyone's got secrets. You don't want yours dragged out, do you? I froze. He was bluffing. He had to be. But the way he looked at me, like a man holding a loaded gun he didn't need to fire, yet made me second-guess everything. That night, I found my mother's locket missing again. This time, it didn't come back. I searched the pawn shops. I searched his drawers. Nothing. When I confronted him, he didn't even bother pretending. He just stared at me, his face calm, almost amused. It's just a thing, he said softly. Why do you care so much about things? Because it was the last piece of her I had. Because it was all I had left that couldn't be replaced. But I didn't say that. I couldn't. Instead, I turned and walked away, shaking so badly I could barely breathe. For the next few days, he acted like nothing happened. Watching TV in the living room, drinking beer, asking if I wanted takeout. But I wasn't sleeping anymore. I wasn't eating much. Every time the house creaked, I thought it was him sneaking into my room again. Every time my phone buzzed, I wondered if it was another charge I didn't make. One evening, I came home from work to find the front door unlocked. My heart raced. Inside, drawers were open, papers scattered across the floor. At first, I thought we'd been robbed. But then I noticed the only things missing were mine. My laptop, my watch, my cash, Daniel's room, untouched. That was the moment the truth sank in. He wasn't just stealing anymore. He was dismantling me, piece by piece. And I had to decide if I was going to let him. I sat down in the wrecked living room, my hands shaking as I dialed my phone. For the first time, I considered calling the police. But before I could press call, the door opened. Daniel walked in, carrying a bag of groceries. He froze when he saw me sitting there, the mess around me, the phone in my hand. Our eyes locked, and in that silence, I realized we'd crossed a line we could never step back from. He dropped the grocery bag onto the counter, the contents spilling across the linoleum. Apples rolled, a carton of milk thudded against the edge. He didn't even glance at them. His eyes were fixed on the phone in my hand. Who are you calling? He asked, voice low, sharp. I didn't answer. My thumb hovered over the screen, trembling. One tap, and it would all be out of my hands. Police. Report. Consequences. You don't want to do that, he said, stepping closer. I rose to my feet. You broke into my room. You stole from me. You pawned Mom's locket. I told you. He cut me off, his tone slicing through my words. It's just stuff. You care too much about stuff. My throat burned. It was all I had left of her. The silence that followed felt like it might split me in half. Daniel's expression flickered something almost human, almost regretful, but it vanished as quickly as it came. You're overreacting, he said flatly, grabbing the milk carton and shoving it into the fridge like this was any other Tuesday night. You call the cops. You'll regret it. My voice was barely more than a whisper. Are you threatening me? He turned then, leaning against the counter. His eyes caught the dim kitchen light. Cold, familiar. I realized, suddenly, that I'd seen that same look when we were kids, when he wanted to win, no matter what it cost. I'm telling you the truth, he said. If you think the family's gonna back you over me, you don't know them as well as you think. My chest tightened. He wasn't bluffing. I could hear the confidence in his voice, the way he'd already rehearsed this. I'd grown up believing family was safety. He'd grown up learning it was leverage. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed with the phone clutched to my chest, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the sound of his footsteps, wondering how far he'd go. By morning, I decided on something I never thought I'd do. I called my Aunt Marie. She lived 2 towns over, the only relative who ever questioned the family's obsession with loyalty. The only one who'd stood at my mother's funeral and whispered in my ear, "Don't let them eat you alive." When she answered, her voice was warm, cautious. "Sweetheart, is everything okay?" And for the first time, I broke. I told her everything. The missing money, the receipts, the footage, the locket, the threat. There was a long pause. Then she said, "Pack a bag. Come here." Tonight. But when I hung up, Daniel was standing in the hallway, watching me. How much did she hear? He asked. My stomach dropped. I hadn't heard him wake up. Hadn't heard him move. You were listening, I whispered. He stepped closer, his voice calm, almost gentle. You think you can run to Marie? She's not gonna save you. Nobody's gonna save you. Something in me snapped then. The fear turned to fire. I have proof, Daniel. Video, receipts, I can end this. His lips curled into a slow smile. Then why haven't you? I didn't answer. Because he was right. Because proof wasn't always enough. Because sometimes family ties strangled tighter than chains. That evening, I tried to pack a bag quietly, slipping clothes into an old duffel. My plan was simple: leave while he was at the bar, head to Marie's, bring the footage, and finally be free. But when I unzipped the bag, I found it already packed. Not with clothes, with my things, my wallet, my old watch, even the empty jewelry box where the locket had been. At the very top was a folded note in his handwriting. Run, and you lose everything. I dropped it, my hands shaking. He knew. He was always 2 steps ahead. That night, I sat at the kitchen table waiting for him, the duffel bag still open on the floor, my laptop in front of me, the footage queued up. When he came in, his eyes went straight to the screen. Sit down, I said. My voice surprised me, steady, stronger than I felt. He laughed. What is this, an intervention? No, this is the truth, and you're going to see it. I pressed play. The video filled the silence. His movements in my room, his hand in my drawer, his shadow stretched across my walls. For the first time, he didn't try to interrupt. He just watched. When the clip ended, I closed the laptop softly. My heart pounded. Do you understand? I asked. He leaned back in his chair, his face unreadable. Then he whispered, if you show that to anyone, you're finished. Finished? I echoed. You think they'll believe you? After everything you've done? His eyes glinted. After everything you've hidden? My mouth went dry. What are you talking about? He smirked, slow and deliberate. Let's just say, I know more about you than you think. A chill ran down my spine. He wasn't bluffing this time. He had something. And as I stared at him across that dim kitchen table, I realized with sudden clarity, this wasn't just about theft anymore. It was war. I couldn't breathe. The way he said it so calm, so sure, it was like he'd slipped a knife between my ribs and twisted. What do you mean? My voice cracked. Daniel just smiled, leaning back like he had all the time in the world. Everyone's got skeletons, cousin. You think I didn't notice the late nights? The locked drawers? The stuff you don't want anyone else to see? My mouth went dry. He didn't know. He couldn't know. But what if he did? He leaned forward, elbows on the table, voice dropping to a near whisper. Imagine what Aunt Marie would say if she found out you weren't as perfect as she thinks. Imagine what the family would say. Who do you think they'll believe? The cousin who helped after his divorce, or the one sneaking around, hiding things? I wanted to shout, to slam my fist on the table, to tell him he was lying. But the truth was, there were things I kept hidden. Mistakes. Moments I'd never want dragged into the open. And Daniel was the kind of man who'd twist half a truth into a whole noose. You're bluffing, I whispered. His smile widened. Try me. The silence stretched. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the faint tick of the kitchen clock. My skin prickled with sweat. Then he stood abruptly, pushing back his chair so hard it screeched against the tile. He grabbed a beer from the fridge, cracked it open, and walked away like the conversation never happened. I sat frozen, staring at the spot he'd left empty, my mind spinning. That night, I dreamed of my mother's locket, the way it used to catch the sunlight when she leaned over my bed to kiss me goodnight. In the dream, Daniel dangled it from his fingers and dropped it into fire, smiling as it melted. I woke drenched in sweat, my chest tight with rage. The next morning, my bank called. Unusual activity, the woman on the line said. Several large withdrawals from your account. My stomach dropped. How large? 4,000 over the past 2 weeks. I nearly dropped the phone. I didn't even have that much to spare. That was rent, bills, food, everything. When I checked the account online, the transactions were there. Gas stations, ATM withdrawals, transfers to accounts I didn't recognize. My name on every receipt. And then it hit me. He wasn't just stealing cash. He was using my identity. When I confronted him, he didn't deny it. He just leaned against the doorframe, sipping his beer. Relax, I'll pay it back. You've ruined me, I shouted. Do you have any idea what you've done? He shrugged. Banks write this stuff off all the time. You'll be fine. I could go to jail. I snapped. Not if you keep your mouth shut. His eyes hardened. But if you don't, he let the sentence hang, unfinished, thick with threat. That was the breaking point. I realized then he wasn't going to stop until I had nothing left: money, reputation, even the roof over my head. I called Aunt Marie again, whispering in the bathroom with the shower running so he couldn't hear. You have to get out of there, she said. Now, tonight. I'll drive to you myself if I have to. I agreed. We set a plan. Midnight. She'd meet me at the diner off Highway 12, the one we used to go to when I was a kid. But when I stepped out of the bathroom, Daniel was standing in the hallway, his head tilted, his smile thin. Talking to your aunt again? He asked softly. My chest tightened. No. He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell the beer on his breath. You're lying. I shook my head. I was just... But he cut me off, his voice dropping to a whisper. If you try to leave, you won't make it. The threat was so quiet, so direct, but for a moment I thought I'd imagined it. But the way he stared at me flat, unblinking told me I hadn't. That night, I packed anyway. Heart pounding, I slid clothes into my duffel, stuffed my laptop with the footage inside, zipped it tight. Every creak of the house made me flinch. Every shadow felt alive. At 11:45, I slipped out the back door, bag slung over my shoulder. The night air was cold, sharp in my lungs. I kept my steps light, fast, heading for the street. And then I saw it. Daniel's truck, parked across the street, engine idling, headlights off. He was waiting. My pulse thundered in my ears. I froze, hidden in the shadows, clutching the duffel so tight my knuckles ached. He sat there, unmoving, watching the house, like he knew, like he'd been waiting for me to try. And that was the moment I realized I wasn't just dealing with theft anymore. I was dealing with someone who'd rather destroy me than let me go. I pressed myself against the side of the house, holding my breath, the cold brick biting into my back. Daniel's truck sat like a beast in the dark, rumbling softly, headlights dead. He wasn't leaving. He was hunting. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Aunt Marie. I silenced it instantly, terrified the glow would give me away. My hands trembled as I typed. He's outside, watching. I can't get out. Her reply came seconds later. Stay inside. I'm coming. But inside wasn't safe either. The house was his territory, his rules, his eyes on every creak, every whisper. I slipped back through the kitchen door, locking it behind me, my heart hammering so hard it hurt. Every sound felt amplified, the ticking clock, the faint hum of the fridge. The living room was dark, too dark. And then I saw it, the glow of a cigarette ember in the corner. He was inside. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. He exhaled slowly, smoke curling in the shadows. You really think you can sneak past me? His voice was calm. Too calm. You think I don't know you better than that? I clutched the duffel tighter. You went through my things again. I go through everything, he said, stepping forward. The cigarette's glow revealed the edge of his grin. You made me. You put those cameras up. You wanted a war. You've got one. My chest tightened. Why, Daniel? Why do this to me? He tilted his head, studying me like I was a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit. Because you've always had what I didn't. Stability. Respect. People actually trust you. Me? He laughed, bitter and sharp. I was always the screw-up, the disappointment. But now, I've got the upper hand. And I'm not giving it back. I felt the walls closing in, the air thick with smoke and menace. I took a step back. You're not going to win this. He flicked the cigarette to the floor, grinding it beneath his boot. Already am. The sound of tires screeching outside shattered the tension. Headlights swept across the curtains. Aunt Marie. Daniel stiffened, eyes narrowing. You called her. Before I could answer, he lunged. He grabbed the duffel, yanking it from my grip. We struggled, the bag ripping open, clothes spilling across the floor. My laptop clattered against the tile. His hand shot out, gripping my wrist so tight it burned. You're not leaving. Not with that footage. Not with anything. Then knocking at the door. Hard. Urgent. Open up. It's me. Aunt Marie's voice rang through the night. For a moment we both froze. The pounding echoed like a drumbeat in my skull. Daniel's grip tightened. His eyes bored into mine. You opened that door and I swear, I didn't let him finish. I twisted free, bolted toward the entryway, and yanked it open. Aunt Marie stood there, her face pale but determined. Behind her, the beam of her headlights cut through the night. Get your things, she ordered, her voice steel. Now. Daniel appeared in the hall, breathing hard, sweat glistening on his forehead. He plastered on a smile, his voice dripping with false charm. Marie, good to see you. You're not believing all this nonsense, are you? But she wasn't looking at him. She was looking at the bruises on my wrist where his fingers had just been. Her eyes hardened. Get your things. I scrambled, scooping up what I could, shoving it into the half-torn duffel. Daniel's voice followed me, low and venomous. You walk out that door. You'll regret it. You think she can protect you? You think anyone can? I ignored him, my pulse a roar in my ears. Aunt Marie grabbed my arm, pulling me toward the car. Daniel followed, his footsteps heavy, his words turning sharp. You're nothing without me. You hear me? Nothing. We slammed the car doors, Marie fumbling with the ignition as he pounded his fist against the window. The engine roared to life. We shot down the street, his shouts fading into the night. I pressed my forehead against the cold glass, shaking, tears blurring the passing lights. But even as the distance grew, his words clung to me like smoke. You'll regret it. I didn't know how, or when, but I knew he wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. The road blurred beneath the headlights as Aunt Marie drove, her hands clenched tight on the wheel. She didn't speak at first, just kept her eyes forward, jaw set like stone. I sat in the passenger seat, gripping my torn duffel, trembling so hard the seatbelt rattled against my chest. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, deliberate. You're safe now. He can't touch you here. I wanted to believe her. I wanted those words to sink in, to wrap around me like armor. But Daniel's face wouldn't leave my mind, his smile as he crushed the cigarette, his grip on my wrist, his voice dripping poison. You'll regret it. I swallowed hard. You don't understand. He's not going to stop. Marie glanced at me, her eyes flickering with something I hadn't seen since I was a kid. Fear. Then we'll make him stop. She brought me to her house, a small place tucked behind overgrown hedges on the edge of town. The porch light buzzed, moths circling, a familiar creak underfoot as we stepped inside. It smelled of lavender and old books. Safe, but safety has a way of feeling temporary when you've lived under threat long enough. That night, Marie made tea, sat me at the kitchen table, and asked me to tell her everything. I showed her the receipts, the bank statements, the fragments of footage I'd managed to save before Daniel grabbed my laptop. Each detail twisted her face tighter. When I finished, she sat back, silent for a long moment. Then she whispered, "He's worse than your uncle ever was." Her words sent a shiver down my spine. I wanted to ask what she meant, but before I could, she stood, pulled her phone from her pocket, and began dialing. "Who are you calling?" I asked. "Someone who can help." The voice on the other end was calm, authoritative. She explained everything quickly, her eyes never leaving mine. When she hung up, she said only, "You've got an appointment tomorrow, with someone who will take this seriously." But that night, as I lay in the guest room staring at the ceiling, I couldn't shake the feeling that Daniel was already plotting his next move. The quiet felt dangerous. Too fragile. I was right. The next morning, Marie's phone rang at dawn. She answered in the hallway, but I heard enough. Daniel had already been calling the rest of the family, spinning his version of the story. "He says you stole from him," Marie said, hanging up, her lips pressed tight. "He says you've been unstable, that you ran off with his things." My stomach turned. They believe him? She hesitated. That was answer enough. By noon, my phone was buzzing with messages from cousins, aunts, even my own brother, each one worse than the last. "How could you do this to him? He needed you and you abandoned him. Family doesn't betray family." My chest felt like it was caving in. Daniel had flipped the script so fast I barely had time to breathe. Marie tried to comfort me, but I could see the worry in her eyes. She knew what I knew. Once the family picked a side, they'd defend it to the grave. And right now, they weren't on mine. That afternoon, I met with the man Marie had called, a lawyer. Grey suit, sharp eyes, voice steady as stone. He listened to everything, looked at the documents, the video clips, the bruises. "You've got enough for a case," he said. "But you need to be prepared. He's already setting up his defense. If this goes public, he'll drag every secret of yours into the light. That's how men like him operate." My hands clenched. "Then let him try." The lawyer studied me, as if weighing whether I understood the war I was about to start. Then he nodded. "We'll file an injunction. Fraud, identity theft, harassment. But you need to stay here. Stay hidden. If he finds you, it complicates everything." I agreed. But that night, as I sat in the guest room, scrolling through the hateful texts from my family, I realized hiding wasn't going to be enough. Because Daniel had already found me. The first sign was the cigarette butt on Marie's driveway. Fresh. Still faintly warm when I picked it up. The second was the voicemail on my phone, left an hour earlier. Daniel's voice, low and mocking. "You think you're safe there? You think hiding behind Marie will save you? I know where you are. And if you try to take me down, I'll take you down first." My hands shook as I replayed it, each word slithering deeper into my chest. I went to Marie, showed her. Her face hardened, but her eyes betrayed the fear. "We need to call the police. Tonight." But when the officers came, they were polite, sympathetic and useless. "It's his word against yours for now," one said, scribbling half-hearted notes. "Until the court process starts, there's not much we can do. Just keep your doors locked. Keep your doors locked." As if that could stop him. That night, every creak of the house set me on edge. I lay awake, listening to the wind rattle the windows, waiting for the sound of footsteps on the porch. And just before dawn, I heard it. Not footsteps. A laugh, low, muffled, drifting through the thin glass of the guest room window. I froze, heart hammering, staring at the curtains glowing faintly with morning light. And then silence, like he wanted me to know he was out there, watching, waiting. I didn't sleep again. By morning, I'd made a decision. If Daniel wanted a war, then I'd give him one. But I had no idea how far he was willing to go. And the next time he showed up, he wasn't just after my money. He was after me. The following days felt like living inside a trap that hadn't sprung yet. Every noise outside made me jump. Every buzz of my phone sent a shiver through my chest. Daniel's shadow was everywhere, even in silence. Marie tried to keep me busy. We cooked, we cleaned, we sat together on the porch like everything was normal. But the tension never left. It pressed on my ribs, a constant reminder that he knew where I was. Then came the envelope. It was stuffed in the mailbox, no return address. Marie handed it to me cautiously, like it might explode. My name scrawled across the front in his handwriting. I opened it with trembling fingers. Inside were photographs. Me sleeping in Marie's guest room. Me walking to her car. Me through the crack in the curtains as I sat on the couch. My blood turned to ice. He wasn't just watching. He was close. Too close. At the bottom of the stack was a single note. "Thought you could hide. Cute." My stomach lurched. Marie gripped my shoulder, her face pale but furious. "We're taking this straight to the police." We did. The officer on duty flipped through the photos, frowning. "Creepy, yeah, but technically, nothing illegal here. They're taken from outside the house. Public space. Public space." The words made me want to scream. "We'll file a report," the officer added. "But unless he trespasses or threatens you directly, Our hands are tied. I wanted to grab him by the collar and shake him, scream that Daniel had already crossed every line. But Marie's hand on my arm kept me still. She knew, fighting them now would only waste time. That night, I barely touched dinner. Marie tried to reassure me, but I could see her checking the locks, pulling the curtains twice over. Sleep was impossible. Every shadow outside the window felt alive. At 2 a.m. I heard it, the soft scrape of gravel. I crept to the window, careful not to make a sound, and peered through the gap in the curtain. Daniel stood in the driveway. His cigarette glowed in the dark, the ember pulsing like a warning light. He wasn't trying to hide this time. He wanted me to see him. I stumbled back, heart hammering, nearly tripping over the nightstand. Marie burst into the room seconds later, her face pale. "I saw," she whispered. "I already called the police." By the time they arrived, he was gone. No footprints, no trace, just the lingering smell of smoke in the night air. The next morning, Marie's lawyer called. "We need to move fast," he said. "He's escalating. If we can show this pattern of harassment, the judge will have no choice but to issue an emergency protective order." I agreed. We gathered everything, the bank records, the receipts, the photos, the voicemail. A thick stack of evidence that painted the picture of a man unraveling into obsession. But I knew evidence wasn't the same as safety. Because Daniel didn't care about laws. He cared about control. 2 nights later, he proved it. I woke to the sound of shattering glass. Marie's scream cut through the darkness. I bolted from the guest room, my bare feet slipping on shards scattered across the kitchen floor. The back window was smashed open, curtains flapping in the night wind. And standing in the middle of the room, Daniel. He looked feral, his hair wild, his eyes bloodshot, his hands trembling as he clutched a crowbar. "You thought you could take everything from me," he hissed, his voice raw, almost broken. "You thought you could ruin me." Marie grabbed a skillet from the counter, holding it up between them like a shield. "Get out, Daniel," she shouted. He laughed, the sound jagged and unhinged. "Out? This is family. Family doesn't kick family out." I could barely breathe. My heart was trying to tear its way out of my chest. But I forced myself to step forward, my voice shaking but loud. "You're not family anymore." For a split second, something flickered in his eyes, shock, hurt, maybe even grief. But then it hardened into rage. He raised the crowbar. And before I could move, before Marie could swing, red and blue lights flooded the room. Police stormed in, shouting commands. Daniel froze, crowbar still raised, his face lit in the strobe of sirens. He dropped it with a clang that echoed through the kitchen. Hands on his head, cuffs clicking shut, his eyes locked on mine, burning with fury as they dragged him out. "This isn't over," he shouted, his voice cracking the night. "You'll regret this, both of you." And then he was gone, swallowed by flashing lights and the roar of engines. The house fell silent except for my ragged breathing, and Marie's trembling hands lowering the skillet. I collapsed against the wall, every nerve in my body on fire, every muscle shaking with exhaustion. It was over, but in my gut, I knew he meant what he said. It wasn't over. Not yet. They kept him overnight. That much we knew. The officers who'd hauled Daniel away promised he'd be booked for trespassing, breaking and entering, maybe even attempted assault. Marie clutched my hand the whole ride home from the station, whispering, "It's finally over. You're safe now." But I didn't believe it, because I saw his face as they dragged him out. I heard his voice cracking the night like a curse. "This isn't over." The next morning, the phone calls began. First my brother, then my uncle, then 3 cousins in a row, each one more furious than the last. "You had him arrested. What kind of family does that? Do you know how bad this makes us look?" I tried to explain about the stolen money, the threats, the smashed window, but none of it mattered. In their eyes, I'd broken the one unbreakable rule: blood before law. By noon, my phone was flooded with messages. "Traitor, snake, you'll pay for this." Some from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. Marie made me turn the phone off. "They're brainwashed," she said, her voice firm. "Don't let them twist this. You did the right thing." But by evening, Daniel was out, released on bail. We learned from the lawyer that his supportive family had pooled money together to get him free within hours. When I heard, something inside me snapped. Rage burned hotter than fear for the first time. He breaks into the house with a weapon, and they bail him out like he's some hero. I shouted, pacing the kitchen. What does it take for them to see the truth? Do I have to end up in a hospital bed? Marie grabbed my shoulders, steadying me. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Then we'll make them see. We'll make the court see. You have to trust the process." I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But I'd grown up around this family long enough to know the process didn't matter. What mattered was loyalty. And loyalty was already stacked against me. That night, I dreamed of the locket again. My mother's voice, soft and broken. "Don't let him take you too." When I woke, sweat soaking the sheets, the clock read 3:12 a.m. I crept to the window. Part of me terrified of what I might see. Nothing, but taped to the glass from outside was a folded piece of paper. My blood ran cold as I peeled it off with shaking fingers. Inside, scrawled in black marker, were 4 words. "Family doesn't betray family." I stumbled back, bile rising in my throat. He'd been here, right outside my window while I slept. Marie called the police again. They came, wrote another report, promised to increase patrols. But I saw it in their eyes, the weariness, a doubt. To them, this was just a family feud gone sour. To me, it was survival. The lawyer worked fast. Within 48 hours, we were in front of a judge, requesting an emergency protective order. Daniel wasn't allowed within 500 feet of me, or Marie's house. On paper, it was exactly what I needed. But paper doesn't stop obsession. 2 nights later, Marie's car tires were slashed in the driveway. The garage door spray-painted with one word, traitor. She tried to shield me from it, but I saw the fear in her eyes as she scrubbed red paint off metal. He wants to scare us, she said. That's all. He's desperate, but desperation is dangerous. Desperation is a match waiting to fall into gasoline, and the gasoline was everywhere. The family stopped speaking to me altogether, except for the occasional anonymous voicemail filled with venom. Daniel's lies spread like wildfire. He was the victim, now the poor cousin betrayed by the one person who was supposed to help him. The isolation pressed on me harder than the threats. Every friend I thought I had seemed to vanish overnight, unwilling to pick sides. Except Marie. She stayed. She fought beside me. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get worse, the lawyer called with news that made my stomach drop. There's been movement in your accounts again, he said. More withdrawals. This time tied to online loans in your name. My voice broke, but my cards are frozen. My accounts are locked. Not enough, he said grimly. He has your social security number. He's opening new lines of credit. If this keeps up, you could be looking at tens of thousands in debt before this goes to trial. I pressed a hand to my forehead, dizzy with rage. So what you're telling me, he's not just stealing my money now. He's stealing my future. The lawyer didn't answer. He didn't have to. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the pile of evidence bank statements, receipts, photographs, reports. My whole life reduced to a file of crimes committed in my name. And I realized something chilling. Daniel didn't want money anymore. He wanted me broken. And unless I found a way to stop him, he was going to get exactly that. The next morning, Marie found me still at the kitchen table, head in my hands. The pile of evidence spread out like a battlefield. Neither of us had slept. You can't keep living like this, she said softly, setting a mug of coffee in front of me. I stared at the steam curling upward. He's not going to stop, Marie. Not until I have nothing left. Not until I couldn't finish the sentence. She pulled out a chair, sat across from me, her eyes steady. Then we don't wait for him to stop. We make him. There was steel in her tone I hadn't heard before. Marie had always been the quiet one, the black sheep of the family who'd walked away when the rest clung to their toxic loyalty. But now I saw it, why she'd survived. She'd learned to fight differently. By noon, we were at the lawyer's office again, this time with a folder of the new credit scams Daniel had opened in my name. He flipped through the papers, his face grim. This is identity theft on top of harassment and breaking and entering. He's burying himself. The problem is, he knows how to play the victim. He'll stall, twist, drag this out as long as he can. I leaned forward, my voice raw. So what do I do in the meantime? Just wait for him to destroy me. The lawyer studied me. You build your case stronger than his lies. You document everything. Every threat, every message, every shadow he casts. I nodded, though the words felt hollow. Documentation didn't keep you safe when someone was willing to smash windows at 2 a.m. That night, Marie and I reinforced the doors with heavy bars, nailed boards over the broken kitchen window. It felt less like a home and more like a bunker. But the fear wasn't just in the house, it was in me. I jumped at every sound. I kept my phone clutched in my hand like a lifeline. My dreams were filled with cigarettes glowing in the dark, with Daniel's voice whispering, "Family doesn't betray family." And then came the fire. It was just after midnight when the acrid smell hit me. I jolted upright in the guest bed, smoke already seeping through the crack under the door. "Marie!" I screamed, bolting into the hallway. She burst from her room, coughing, her nightgown streaked with ash. The kitchen was glowing orange, flames licking up the curtains, smoke pouring into every corner. We stumbled out the back door, choking, gasping for air. The cold night hit me like a slap, but the sight froze me harder than the chill ever could. On the driveway, illuminated by the glow of the fire, sat a single gas can, and leaning against it, a cigarette butt still smoldering. I knew whose it was. The fire department arrived minutes later, sirens wailing, neighbors gathering in their yards. We stood shivering in the street as hoses doused the flames, the house hissing and cracking as if alive. Marie clutched my hand, her face ashen. He tried to kill us. Her words cut through the smoke, sharper than any blade. The police questioned us, scribbling notes, promising to investigate. But I saw it in their eyes, the same weariness, the same doubt. Until he was caught red-handed, they were just reports in a growing pile. By dawn, the kitchen was gutted, blackened, the smell of smoke clinging to my skin. The house was unlivable. That's when I realized the truth Daniel had been trying to show me all along. He wasn't just stealing from me. He was erasing me, piece by piece, burning away everything that tethered me to safety, to family, to home. And if I didn't fight back harder, if I didn't take him down completely, he was going to succeed. The lawyer called later that morning, his voice tight with urgency. "The fire changes everything. This is attempted arson, potential attempted murder. If we can prove it's him, he won't just face jail time. He'll face decades." I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles ached. Then prove it. But even as I said it, I knew proving wasn't enough. Daniel had already slipped through the cracks too many times. He'd charmed his way out of consequences, hidden behind family loyalty, twisted every truth into a weapon. This time, I couldn't just wait for the system to catch him. This time, I had to be ready for the moment he came back. Because he would. And when he did, I wasn't sure if I'd call the police first, or pull the trigger myself. The fire was the line in the sand. Up until then, part of me had clung to the idea that Daniel was still salvageable, that if he just hit rock bottom, if someone reached him, he'd stop. But as I stared at the blackened wreck of Marie's kitchen, the walls dripping with soot, the smell of smoke seared into my lungs, that illusion burned away too. He hadn't just stolen from me. He hadn't just threatened me. He had tried to erase me. And there's no coming back from that. The next days blurred into paperwork, phone calls, and the relentless stink of smoke. The insurance adjuster walked through Marie's house with his clipboard, muttering numbers, treating the wreckage of her life like a math equation. The police came again, took photos, made promises they couldn't keep. But in the middle of it all, I got another envelope. This one wasn't in the mailbox. It was slipped under the front door, right through the ash-stained boards Marie had nailed up. Inside was the locket, my mother's locket, tarnished, scratched, the clasp bent. But it was hers, mine, and with it, another note, written in the same jagged hand as before. I give back what I take. When I decide you've learned. My stomach turned. He hadn't pawned it. He'd kept it. As a trophy. A reminder that no matter how far I ran, he was always holding a piece of me. Marie wanted to hand it to the police immediately, but I stopped her. No, I whispered, clutching the locket in my fist so hard it cut into my palm. This isn't just evidence. This is war. The lawyer called the following morning with news that should have felt like victory. Daniel had been picked up again, this time for violating the restraining order. Neighbors had reported seeing him lurking near Marie's yard at night. But instead of relief, I felt dread, because I knew the pattern now. He'd be held, he'd be questioned, and then he'd be out again. Marie drove me to the courthouse for the first hearing. I sat in the back, my hands cold despite the August heat, the locket like a weight in my pocket. And then I saw him, Daniel, shackled but smirking. His eyes found mine across the room and held, burning, daring me to look away. When the judge asked if I wanted to speak, I stood. My voice shook, but I forced the words out. He stole from me. He broke into my home. He threatened me. He tried to burn us alive. If you let him walk free again, he will finish what he started. The courtroom fell silent. The judge studied me. Then Daniel. For a moment, I thought I saw doubt flicker on her face. Then she spoke. Mr. Dalton, bail is denied. You will remain in custody until trial. The gavel struck. It should have been the sound of victory. But when Daniel was led out, he turned his head just enough for me to see his lips form the words I dreaded most. Not over. And I believed him. Because even locked away, Daniel's reach stretched far. The family calls grew uglier, cousins threatening to make things right themselves. My brother left a voicemail that shook me more than I wanted to admit. You think jail's the end? He's blood. You're nothing. And blood always wins. Marie tried to shield me from it all, but I could see the weight wearing on her too. Sleepless nights carved shadows under her eyes. Every creak in the house made her flinch. And then, one evening, we came home from the grocery store to find the front door ajar. Inside, the living room was ransacked. Papers scattered, cushions slashed, drawers emptied. But nothing was stolen. Nothing except the folder. The evidence. Every receipt. Every bank statement. Every photo gone. On the coffee table sat one single item in their place. The locket. This time polished, gleaming. And a final note tucked inside its chain. Even from a cage, I'm closer than you think. I collapsed onto the couch. The world tilting. My pulse a thunderclap in my ears. Marie stood frozen in the doorway. Her face pale. How? He's in jail. But I already knew. Family. Loyalists. They weren't just defending him. They were working for him. And if they could reach inside this house, if they could strip me bare even while he sat in a cell, then Daniel's war wasn't bound by walls or bars. It was bound by blood. And blood doesn't let go. After the break-in, something inside me shifted. The fear was still there, thick and heavy, like smoke in my lungs, but beneath it, a new fire burned. I was done reacting, done waiting for Daniel to make the next move. Marie sat across from me at the kitchen table that night, the polished locket glinting between us like a cruel joke. Her hands shook as she lit a cigarette, something she hadn't done in years. He's in custody, she whispered. He's supposed to be in custody. He is, I said. My voice surprised me. It wasn't trembling anymore, which means someone else did this for him. Her eyes narrowed. Family, I nodded. He's pulling strings from inside. And if they're willing to do this, they'll do worse. The lawyer confirmed our suspicions the next morning. Daniel had been making phone calls from jail, dozens of them. To uncles. To cousins. Even to my brother. He's orchestrating this like a campaign, the lawyer said grimly. Spreading his version of the story. Turning them into his soldiers. That was when I realized. This wasn't just Daniel anymore. It was me against the whole bloodline. The weight of that truth nearly broke me. I hadn't just lost money, privacy, safety. I had lost a family. Every voice that should have defended me was now sharpening knives behind my back. And yet, I felt lighter. Because once you accept someone as your enemy, you stop expecting them to save you. Marie drove me to the courthouse again for a follow-up hearing. I wore long sleeves to cover the bruises, even though Daniel hadn't touched me in weeks. Trauma leaves marks that fabric can't hide. When they brought him in, shackled, his eyes found mine instantly. That smile again. The kind that said, "I'm still winning." But this time, I didn't look away. I held his stare until the judge spoke, until the gavel struck. The trial was set. 3 weeks. 3 weeks to prove that I wasn't just a bitter cousin making up stories. 3 weeks to survive whatever his soldiers had planned. That night, the phone rang again. Unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Silence. Then softly, a voice I knew too well, my brother's. "You can still fix this," he whispered. "Drop the charges. Tell them you overreacted. If you do that, maybe we can let this go." My throat tightened. "Maybe? You think after everything he's done, I can just—" "Shut up and listen," he hissed. "You don't understand what's coming if you don't. He's not the only one who wants you gone." And then the line went dead. I sat there, the dial tone buzzing in my ear, my whole body trembling. Marie touched my shoulder. "What did he say?" I swallowed hard. That it's not just Daniel anymore. That night, we didn't sleep. We sat in the living room with the lights on, every creak of the house making us tense. I kept the locket clutched in my palm, the polished metal digging into my skin. And for the first time, I wondered if survival meant becoming someone I didn't recognize. Someone willing to strike first. The thought terrified me, but not as much as Daniel's words, still echoing in my head. "Even from a cage, I'm closer than you think." The next morning, Marie found a dead crow on the porch. Its neck snapped, wings spread wide. Pinned beneath it was another note. "Family or nothing." Her scream brought the neighbors running, but when the police arrived, they just shook their heads, wrote another report, and left. The system wasn't going to save me. The family wanted to erase me. Daniel was waiting for trial. And me? I was done being prey. I was ready to become something else. Something he wouldn't see coming. The crow was the last straw. Marie buried it in the garden with trembling hands, her face pale, her lips pressed together like she was holding back everything she wanted to scream. I stood beside her, clutching the locket in my pocket so hard my nails cut into my palm. "He's not just threatening anymore," I whispered. "This is ritual. This is a warning." Marie looked up at me, dirt on her hands, fury in her eyes. "Then we stop warning too. We start fighting back." Those words rattled in my chest. For weeks I'd been playing defense, filing reports, calling lawyers, clutching evidence like it was a shield. But shields only work if the world believes in them. And my world didn't. That night, I sat at Marie's old desktop computer, combing through files, emails, every scrap of data Daniel had left behind on shared accounts when he stayed with me. Buried in the mess of receipts and browser history, I found something. A string of emails between him and a payday loan company. Applications in my name. His sloppy grammar, his slang, his impatience bleeding through every sentence. Proof. But proof wasn't enough. Not anymore. I needed to make sure when Daniel fell. He fell so hard even his loyalists couldn't drag him back up. The lawyer warned me the next morning. "Be careful. If you start digging too deep, if you push the wrong button, his people might come after you harder." I almost laughed. Harder than dead crows on the porch? Harder than fire in the kitchen? He didn't answer. Marie and I built a fortress around the house. Cameras on every corner, motion lights, even a shotgun propped against the wall by the front door. We weren't just defending anymore, we were daring him to try again. And try, he did. 2 nights later, I woke to the shriek of the alarm. The cameras caught them 2 cousins, faces half covered, creeping through the yard with baseball bats. They froze when the floodlights hit, then bolted into the night. The footage went straight to the police. For once, they couldn't ignore it. The cousins were picked up within hours. But when I saw their faces in the mugshots, my stomach twisted. These were boys I'd grown up with, boys I'd played tag with in the backyard at Grandma's house. Now they were tools in Daniel's war. Blood turned to weapons. Marie poured whiskey into our tea that night, her hands trembling less than mine. "They're coming apart," she said. "He's desperate. That's when people make mistakes." She was right, because Daniel's next move wasn't clever. It was reckless. A week before the trial, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. It was him. His voice was low, ragged, but steady. "You think you've won because I'm in here? Because you've got your little folder of receipts and videos? None of that matters. When the family shows up in court, you'll be the liar. You'll be the traitor. And when I walk out, I'll finish what I started." I swallowed hard, forcing steel into my voice. "You're not walking out." Silence on the line. Then a laugh, cold, cruel. "You don't even recognize yourself anymore, do you? That's how I win. Not by taking your money. Not by taking your house. By making you one of me." The line went dead. I sat there, phone still pressed to my ear, his words sinking like poison. Was he right? Had all this fighting, all this rage, turned me into something I never wanted to be? But then I felt the weight of the locket in my pocket, warm from my grip. My mother's voice echoed in my head. "Don't let him take you too." I wasn't him. I wasn't. But survival changes you. The trial began in a storm of tension. Daniel walked in wearing a suit borrowed from someone else, shackled but grinning, nodding to the row of family sitting behind him. My family, all of them glaring at me like I was the traitor he painted me to be. When I took the stand, my hands shook, my voice cracked, but I told everything. The theft, the fights, the fire, the photos. I held up the locket, my mother's locket, and my voice finally steadied. He didn't just take money, he took pieces of me. And I'm here because I won't let him take the last one. Daniel's lawyer tried to shred me apart. Called me unstable. Called me vindictive. Said I framed him because I couldn't handle his success. But then the footage played. The receipts. The emails in his name. The photographs of him outside the house. Piece by piece, the mask cracked. And when the cousins testified under pressure, when they admitted Daniel had told them to teach me a lesson, the mask shattered. The jury left the room. The silence stretched forever. And when they returned, the word rang through the courtroom like a thunderclap. Guilty. Daniel's face went pale for the first time. His smile vanished. His eyes darted to mine. Desperate, furious, broken. As they led him away, he shouted, voice cracking like glass. This isn't the end. You'll see. I'll always be blood. But his words felt small now. Because for the first time, I didn't feel afraid. For the first time, I felt free. The gavel's echo still rattled in my bones long after the courtroom emptied. I stood there, numb, watching Daniel being dragged away in shackles. His voice still rang in my head, I'll always be blood. Marie's hand slipped into mine, steady, grounding. It's over, she whispered. But walking out of that courthouse, I realized something bitter and strange. It was over for him, but not for me. Because endings aren't clean when blood is involved. The weeks after the trial were quiet in a way that felt unnatural. No phone calls in the middle of the night. No cigarette smoke curling outside the window. No dead animals on the porch. The silence was almost worse, like the world was holding its breath. The family didn't call, not to apologize, not to scream. Nothing. It was as if I'd been erased from the bloodline entirely. No birthdays, no weddings, no funerals. I wasn't just the cousin who betrayed Daniel. I was the ghost who never existed. At first, that isolation crushed me. Every childhood memory soured holidays at Grandma's house. Games of hide and seek with the same cousins who later swung bats at my windows. The laughter felt counterfeit now. The bonds counterfeit. But slowly, in the stillness, something else grew. Freedom. I got new bank accounts, new locks, new passwords. I started therapy, peeling back the layers of paranoia and grief, learning how to sleep without jolting awake at every sound. Marie stayed by my side, her house still scarred from the fire, but her voice stronger than ever. One evening, months later, we sat on her rebuilt porch, sipping tea as the sun went down. The locket rested against my collarbone, warm from the day's heat. You did it, Marie said softly. You broke the chain. I thought about that. How Daniel had always said blood was everything. How the family had proved blood could be poison. No, I said finally. I didn't break it. I just stopped letting it break me. Marie smiled, tears in her eyes. For the first time in what felt like years, I let myself smile too. But even now, sometimes I catch myself looking over my shoulder. I see a man with Daniel's gate crossing the street. I smell smoke in the air and my chest tightens. Trauma doesn't leave clean. It stains. And yet so does survival. Because survival changes you. It hardens you. It teaches you that family isn't who shares your blood. Family is who stands beside you when blood turns against you. Daniel will spend years, maybe decades, behind bars. Maybe one day he'll get out. Maybe one day I'll hear his voice again, dripping with the same venom. But I'm not afraid anymore. Because the night of the verdict, when the judge said guilty, and the chains clinked around his wrists, something inside me shifted. I stopped being prey. I stopped being his victim. And I started being someone new. That was the day I stopped recognizing who I was. And the day I finally became free.